In the story of Exodus, there's a number of circumstances under which Moses has an encounter with God. And they're very useful stories to understand because they point you to how that can make itself manifest in your own life. So the first real encounter that Moses has with God is in the story of the burning bush. And by this time, Moses is an adult. He's left his home. He's gone out and he's got married. He's apprenticed as a shepherd, which was a very, very hard job in those days because shepherds not only had to protect the weakest and serve them, but also keep the lions and the wolves at bay by themselves out in the wilderness. It was a very hard job. And Moses has mastered this. So he's grown up and he's adopted a role that's like a standard social role. You know, he's a husband, he's a shepherd, he's an adult. Okay, and so kudos to him. But then one day he's out in the wilderness by the holy mountain. I think it's Horeb in that story, but the holy mountain is always the place where heaven and earth touch. And so there are all sorts of transformation stories that occur in the biblical accounts at Mount Horeb or at Mount Sinai, where God and earth meet. And he's out near the holy mountain and something attracts his attention. And he goes off the beaten path to investigate. Okay, so that's the first thing. That's the first bit of wisdom to derive from the story. You'll have your role, and you should have your role as a socialized adult, right? So you're kind of a type that way. You're maybe even a cookie cutter type, but you've adopted this mature social role. It doesn't make you a full individual, but it's better than being immature and staying in your father's tent, for example, which is what Abraham does until he's very old. So something attracts Moses' attention and he goes off to investigate. Okay, so, and then he sees that it's a burning bush. And so what's a burning bush? Well, it's the tree of life, and life is often represented as a branching tree. And it's on fire because it's compelling, because fire is compelling, and fire is alive, and it's a symbol of life because everything that is alive burns. That's what metabolism is. And so a burning bush is like life itself intensified to the ultimate degree, and that's what attracts Moses' attention, and he gets closer and closer to it, which means he investigates more and more deeply. And as he investigates more deeply, he starts to understand that he's nearing the depths. He's on sacred ground. He takes off his shoes, and that's an indication of his willingness to transform in identity. And he continues to investigate, and then the voice of being itself speaks to him from the depths, and it tells him that it reveals itself to him as the ground of being itself, and it transforms him into the leader who invites his people away from slavery and who stands up against tyranny. And so that's the story of Moses' baptism. And so what does that mean for the ordinary person? Well, it means that you need to grow up and adopt a role. You need to mature. You need to become an adult. You need to be a good man in your time. But then you have to pay attention to see what attracts your attention, what calls to you, because there's an autonomy about that, right? You don't get to pick what interests you. It picks you, and you can respond to that call and investigate or reject it. Those are your options. And if you reject it, you stay in your box. But if you follow it, something will call to you. And then if you investigate that, that will transform you. And if you investigate it deeply enough, it'll transform you into the person who can stand up against tyranny and who can lead his people away from slavery. And that's how God is defined in that story. God is the thing that calls to you to take you out of your role, that will shape the manner in which your psyche transforms itself as a consequence of your diligent investigation into what calls to you. And so that's the God that's portrayed. That's one image of the God that's portrayed in the Old Testament.